Hey everyone, Shaun Stevenson here, author of the Throne series, and I'm torn. I gotta talk this out because I recently read Goosebumps, book number 21, Go Eat Worms. And I'm super torn on what I think about this book. So let me talk it out because everyone talks about this book. It's a pretty popular one. A lot of people like it. Some people don't like it, I've seen. But I did not know what I would think going into it. Now, I did know the final twist going into this book, mainly because of the TV show and also because of things I had seen online before I read this book. So I unfortunately knew the final twist, but the journey I did not remember. So I was intrigued to read this one. And especially since I'm reading a lot of back to school themed books right now, I thought, well, Go Eat Worms. This is like takes place at a science fair and a school and homework's involved. So that fit perfectly for back to school theme. So this one was interesting because you have this story where this kid loves worms. He loves worms. Todd loves worms so much that he has like a whole worm tank in his basement, and he's like really into worms. He's going to do worms for the science fair project. He just loves worms. He goes and finds worms all the time. He loves them. And so Todd is really into worms, and he feels like he's the expert on the worms. And then you have this other kid in school who's also doing a science fair project on worms. And this kind of escalates things for Todd, and Todd slowly gets more and more frustrated throughout this book with all the people around him. And his sister plays pranks on him. His friends kind of get annoyed with him. This other kid is like totally like trying to steal the spotlight by doing a worm project too and can do it way better. Like his project turns out way better than Todd's. And so Todd is just getting more and more frustrated as this story goes along. And then you get to the ending, which I will not spoil here, but I will just say it's bonkers. The ending of this book is just bonkers. I got to it and it was one of those endings that I thought, what? What is happening right now? Like this to me is one of R.L. Stine's Goosebumps books that is like just goofy for goofy's sake. Like just to be weird and to be like, wouldn't it be funny if this happened at the end? Like that's totally the style of this one. And I will say those have historically, of all the Goosebumps books I've read so far, those have not been my favorite Goosebumps books. The ones that have like a goofy ending where it's like, whoa. Like One Day at Horrorland was kind of like that for me. I did not really love the ending of that book. I liked some of that book, but I didn't love it all. And I know some people really like that one. Now, I have to admit, I have never been a person who's super into like comedies and like comedy specials, things like that. I know some people love them, and that's awesome if you love them and you love that kind of stuff. More power to you, go for it. They're just not for me. And so I recognize that coming into this book, and this book has a lot more of that factor. This book also has a gross out factor. There were a few times in this book that I thought, oh, that's just disgusting. Like that's real disgusting. And I do not like that at all. And so there were a few moments like that that really kind of were just disgusting and bothersome to me, and I did not love it. So that definitely, I feel like, tainted my view of this book, and I did not enjoy that part as much. However, I do think the character development for Todd is very fascinating because you have this character who is really like a little bit menacing to the worms. Like at one point he cuts all the worms. He cuts a worm in half, and that part came across very just menacing and kind of scary, and especially some stuff that happened at the very end. I thought, oh, that's really disturbing a little bit, like what this kid is doing. So that kind of was a little bit bothersome to me. I'm not going to lie. I kind of thought, oh, this is kind of bothering me a little bit. This kid is kind of like, I hate to say it, but a little bit like he has a mental break where he's like doing these things to these animals in ways that I felt like could have crossed a line if they weren't insects, which I think is a very interesting piece of this book to know going into it. So I didn't really love Todd, but I wasn't annoyed by Todd. Todd and Regina have their brother and sister in this book, and they have a very typical Goosebumps brother-sister relationship, but it was not annoying. Like, I never felt like, oh, you two are just so annoying, can you stop? Like, they actually were very interesting to follow, and I was wondering, like, oh, what's Regina up to? Like, why is she doing that? Like, what's going on with her? And Todd also is an interesting character to follow. So I was never bored, I was never annoyed. I was more just like slightly grossed out and disturbed a little bit. But it's a pretty good story, especially with what happens in the end of the book. I think that things come around on Todd in an interesting way, but he doesn't learn his lesson, which is very interesting to have as part of the Goosebumps book, and is why this is a Goosebumps book in that sense. So this one is a tough one for me. I really had a difficult time trying to figure out, what do I even think about this book? I honestly was trying to figure out, what am I even going to rate it? And to be honest, right now, at this point in the review, I'm not even sure, because I'm still trying to figure out what I actually think about Go Eat Worms. Now, I will say, I think the ending of this book is more interesting than the television episode ending, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. It's more action-packed, there's more going on, and obviously in this kind of a book, you can only have that kind of action if, you know, you're in a book or you have a bigger budget for a television show, which the television show just didn't have, so they couldn't do this ending exactly the way that it's written. I do think there's some very clever things, though, in this book. Like, I think R.L. Stine cleverly wove stuff together, and things that happen at the beginning of the book and in the middle of the book come into play at the very end of the book. And I thought that was really well done. I really enjoy when an author does that kind of work to build in things earlier on in the story that seem to not really have significance, but then you see it at the end and you think, oh, that was kind of genius. Like, I really think that was very smart of you, R.L. Stine, to do it that way. So I really enjoyed some of those sorts of aspects to the book. But again, I didn't really love the whole premise. I think when it comes to Goosebumps, here's what I'm finding. I like the ghost story ones. I like the monster ones. I don't know if I love these kind, where it's a little bit of a like, it's going to come back to get you, what you're doing. Like those kinds of things, I just don't know if I love it. So I think at the end of the day, I'm still pretty torn on this book. So, Go Eat Worms. I know some people love it. I know some people hate it. Some people think it's the worst Goosebumps book. Some people think it's one of the best. For me, I'm going to put this kind of in the middle at a solid 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was good. I thought it was interesting. But at the end of the day, like, this is not one I'm ever going to go reread. I'm never going to go reread this one because I think, oh, I really want to reread that Goosebumps book. That would be more like The Headless Ghost. I would totally want to reread that one for sure. Those kinds of ones are the ones I really love, or Cry of the Cat. I loved that book. So I think those are the kind that I want to go reread, not Go Eat Worms. So it was fine. It was what it was, but I'm not going to reread it. So have you read this one? What do you think? I would love to hear from you in the comments because, like I said, I was super torn. And when I went to Goodreads, I saw like friends of mine on both sides of this, where some people hated it, some people loved it. So I'd be super curious to hear what you think of Go Eat Worms. Yeah, it's an interesting one. So until next time, everybody, keep reading. Bye.